Well, I
Okay.
can hear Sam on the live stream, so
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Can
can.
you can you hear Jacob on the live stream?
I
I ain't got a
sure
clue.
hope so.
If
All
he
right.
says something now.
Well, I think I fixed it, whatever it is.
Jacob isn't the important one anyway,
No.
so
I fixed up the devices. I fixed the audio monitoring. So once again, shout out Holly for the Batman, the Whale. What were the other two? Across the Spider-Verse.
yeah.
And
I haven't seen either of the Spider-Verses yet. I'm
yeah.
so sorry.
And Next to the
Right.
Aisle for Bernard Herrman.
Yeah.
And North by
He,
Northwest.
right. You are back on the live stream, Jacob. So there you go.
Woohoo! All right. Yeah, I think I don't know
And for
what
next
it
to the
was.
aisle, I will come to Raiders.
I don't know what it was using for my microphones. That's weird. And by the way, go read Holly's pieces on the Film Magazine. She wrote about Shelley Duvall and Twilight. So, I think those are probably two. While Kubrick's written about a lot, how much is Shelley Duvall focused on by comparison? And same for The Shining. That was her other one.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
same for Twilight. It's rarely taken seriously as a piece of art. So yeah, it's worth having something written about it, and I'm glad that she did.
Go back and listen to the old audio only second cut where we did Eclipse or New Moon.
New Moon.
Which one? New Moon. I forget what order they go in. Yeah, we did the second one anyway.
Yes. All right. Well, now that we are however long into this with audio issues, we can now get to
Boys are back in town.
the brunt of the show. So let's start with you, Kieran. You wanted to talk a bit about the history of sound and film and give us some insight on maybe this guy you've never heard of, John Williams. It's kind of a generic sounding name.
I think I've heard of him in passing. He's a classical guitarist, isn't he?
It'll never amount to anything with a name like that.
No, he's a white guy. Like nobody takes white guys seriously anymore. You know, the three of us here, we have the 0 watches. So yeah, yeah. I just wanted to make sure before we dive in and go, oh my god, look how amazing these film scores are. That we do kind of appreciate the fact that back in the day before we had synchronized sound coming in 27 with jazz singer. Actually, I think there was 1 or 2 kind of like shorts experimentally kind of doing it, but it kind of had its big premiere in the jazz singer in 1927. And I mean, when that happened, there were reports that people were just like rushing out. There's the big premiere of it, and all the kind of the industry bosses were there, and they played it. And midway through, people were rushing out and phoning up like all the studios, going, "You have to change everything right now. The entire thing has switched."
Yeah, Babylon has that scene where they call and say, it's like the scene from Back to the Future. MGM, it's me, your cousin. I got this new sound you've been looking for.
Yeah, I mean, and that is following actual reports that it was literally overnight, like within hours, every studio just went down. It took Britain a year and a half to get to it with Blackmail and Hitchcock, and even he filmed Blackmail originally without sound in such a way that he kind of got the idea they were going to ask him to do it with sound, so that he could like redo it without.
Yeah, it's still a silent film, other than there being like sound, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. But even then, he's still playing with bits and playing with sound. Like the main character who's killed somebody and is kind of trying to hide the fact. She stabs somebody there at the breakfast table. And there's a knife there on the table in the bread, and he's like, "Oh, would you like to cut yourself some bread?" And Hitchcock plays with the word knife. The person says, use the knife, cut yourself some bread. And in her head, subjectively goes like knife, 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 and it gets gradually louder. So even then, he's playing around with stuff that you just couldn't do 3 years beforehand. This was just impossible. But even the common thing is we call it silent cinema, but silent cinema was never silent. You always had pretty much probably about a year afterwards it started. I guess for the Lumiere brothers premiere film to begin with, they didn't have this. But all these cinemas and Nickelodeons had essentially a pianist or a kind of little organ. There was companies that made them. And you'd have either a pre-given score or, sometimes people would make their own up. in time to whatever was being shown on the screen, and you'd have live accompaniment. So it was never quiet. And there are people now that are doing, shows of these old silent films with live accompaniment. Abattoir every year, which I can't go to this year, and all the tickets sold out within about 4 hours. Always used. I know. They're just like, we need a bigger cinema now. Every year, at least they used to. I don't know if they are doing it this year, but they got a load of silent short films, and they got somebody into. His job was he composed film music for all these silents, and they had like an hour and a half every year of playing these live accompaniments to these silent films, and it's great fun. And these people are ridiculously talented to do it. And then when you get to 27, obviously we can now have sounds and music with it. That was the whole point of the jazz scene, was the fact that we can have essentially a song and dance film, and lots of it is silent.
Was it recorded onto film at that point, or was it recorded and then played while it was exhibited, like kind of to the length of the film?
I can't remember, because eventually it is on the same strip of film. But at the time, I'm not sure. I think a lot of people were experimenting with how you can do it. And it was Warner Brothers that got the system kind of down that worked. So I think, like Paramount and things like that have different variations in the next few years. And essentially it's just one that survives and becomes the leader, and everyone else follows that example when it all comes on the one film strip. So yeah, it's just an awareness that, and I think, to be honest, with film and in general, we pay an awful lot of attention to the visuals, but the music and the soundtracks, that a lot of the time is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. There are some films that would not work without sound. You just couldn't do it. And this isn't just from
De Palma's Blowout is one of those. Like it's a film that really focuses on that audible portion of film to sort of go along with Blow Up, which focuses on the visual.
And I mean, even the kind of music aside, just sound. Think of something like when I was in second year undergrad, we had a lecture on The Haunting, the Robert Wise movie from '63, where pretty much all of the scares is done from sound. You don't see anything; it's just directed and shot with
pitch
the music
black.
in such a way. Yes, that's it. Well, I mean, there's that film where it's like 4 minutes of just a blue screen with some music in the background, and they go, "There you go, that's a film."
Oh, you're talking about the Star Wars prequels, right?
Oh, yes, that's it. No, that's a green screen. Yeah.
But, have you both seen M?
Yes,
I have
seen M.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, this is a good point.
Yeah, definitely one of the most significant, like, early sound films. That it's got the leitmotif that I can't remember how to whistle.
Hall of the Mountain King by Grieg.
The narrator, off-camera sound. It has some silence leading to sudden noises.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like it's kind of film where it is almost, it hasn't quite left with sound era behind fully, because there's stretches of, like, as you say, complete just nothing going on, which kind of makes everything, when the sound music kicks back in, all the more kind of impactful.
And
I was lucky enough to see that at the BFI last year. On big screen. That was quite a special night. And I haven't seen it since university, I don't think. But yeah, it's because sound, when it came, film may be like a primarily visual medium. There's no exaggeration to say that when synchronized sound and kind of scoring films came in, that was like revolutionary. It did like change everything forever.
In the 2016 documentary Score, which I've seen about 2/3 of and just haven't had time to watch the rest, at the start of it, they have lots of interviews with composers like Christopher Young. There's got Marco Beltrami in it, and all these guys. But they also kind of intersperse it with the rough history of sound. And one of the things that I hadn't kind of really thought of was one of the key early scores, that for King Kong, in terms of kind of a big orchestral score for this. And now with me watching so many kind of really short kind of 50s sci-fi and horror movies. It's just like it's the horn sections that do most of the work. There's all ba, 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 and it's that sound on all of them. So you do get these kind of movements in film scores, these big orchestras, and then you go for a more experimental pace, and you get synth coming in with Carpenter and that lot of punk, and then Trent Reznor's doing his stuff now, and Zimmer's going, and you do get these odd kind of changes and movements. And
Ludwig
cinema,
is doing
yeah, and I think there is a case to be made of. I wonder how long cinema would have lasted as kind of one of the biggest kind of industries and art forms out there if we hadn't got synchronized sound.
Yeah.
It would be completely different than what it is now. And that technology to be able to do that, I think, is one of, if not the most significant things in the entirety of film, and possibly just the 20th century in general. Yes, the world wars and all this kind of thing, but I think adding of synchronized sound has to be up there for one of the most significant things that has happened, because it changed an entire medium and the entire cultural global art form ever. It's the equivalent of suddenly painting now has color.
It's why we have TikTok.
Yeah, we wouldn't be doing this.
Nope.
It completely changed the entirety of the landscape of possibly the world, I think, and we shouldn't underestimate that. Anyway,
yeah, how does John Williams play into this grand history?
How does probably the most famous film composer of all time play into this?
Well, he rough background. He started up really from his father was a jazz drummer who played with some quartets around, and he's got an older sister and two younger brothers that do play on his scores. But he was born, let me get a date, February the 8th, 1932, in Queens, New York City. He just went to high school. He at one point was in kind of playing piano in the US Air Force, piano and brass. So he was in kind of service in the Air Force. When he eventually left, he went to Eastman School of Music. I'm getting all this from Wikipedia, so I've made very copious notes.
Well, I used a book for Morricone, and it has 1928 to no ending. Oh.
Yeah. I'm assuming this was published before he passed a few years ago.
Yeah, it's from 18 by Eliza S. Wong. It's the Spaghetti Westerns, A Viewer's Guide.
Yeah. So Williams was working alongside people like Bernard Herrmann and Alfred Newman, and he starts scoring, and actually performing on scores by people like Bernstein and Mancini and Goldsmith. I think he's actually playing the piano in West Side Story as well, which is kind of like the film score equivalent of Jackie Chan being in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. It's just like, oh, he's like one composer being another composer. And he does some he starts getting a lot of films in the kind of the 60s and things like that. I think the earlier one I've seen is The Rare Breed, which has Jimmy Stewart in it, and it's quite funny. I was just randomly watching it, and it comes up with I think he's down as scored by Johnny Williams instead of John Williams, and you just go, is that the same guy? And you look it up and go, yep, that is the same guy. And then you actually listen to it and you go, lots of woodwinds, lots of kind of like call and response. If this isn't John Williams, I'm leaving. And
Sam, please tell me you have early work published under Sammy Sewell Peterson.
If only.
Yeah. It is one of those kind of things. But eventually, kind of in the late 60s, he starts picking up the Oscar noms for things like Goodbye, Mr. Chips, and there's some other stuff that he did. Valley of the Dolls, he won it the score adaptation apparently for Fiddler on the Roof, and he did Images, Robert Altman movie as well. realistically, he's doing all these things and he's getting nominated. He did like Poseidon Adventure and Taron Inferno, these big ones. But I think really the key moment is when he teams up with Spielberg for the Sugarland Express in '74. Because then after that, he goes and does Jaws, which possibly, I'm going to go out on a limb, is the most ingrained culturally piece of music.
Can you sing that one for us?
Da, 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 da. Like,
there's going to be a lot of singing because we cannot play music.
Yeah, or we're trying to for copyright reasons. But everyone knows that it's. I think it's one of those ones where now you know it before you know what Jaws is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And 3-year-old like playing a shark in the bathtub does da 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 da. And yet when Spielberg first sat down with John Williams and apparently went, "What are you thinking for the score?" And John Williams said, da, 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 all that. Yeah. Apparently Spielberg just laughed at him and thought it was a joke, and he's going to go, no, now here's the actual music. And it's like, no, this is what we're doing. You've made a primal movie. It needs a primal piece of music, and we get Jaws, which is just insane. And then after that, 2 years later, because Spielberg and George Lucas are good mates, he goes, "Why don't you do this little film my mate George Lucas is doing? What's it called? The Star Wars." And the rest is history, as now it has been like, the albums in like National Library for Congress for, contributions to whatever. It has been ranked in many, many lists as the greatest film score of all time. It's the Star Wars music, and he's gone on to do 9 films of it. And it gets to the point where you forget the Imperial March isn't in the first one. It comes in Empire Strikes Back, and everyone goes, "What?" Because Empire Strikes Back it's now the Darth Vader thing, and it's these moments where John Williams after Jaws just goes on a run, and I don't think he's really stopped.
I mean, He managed to do some great work, with the Star Wars prequels. I mean, so I like about them. A lot of people understand we have issues with them, but the scores for all 3 are just fantastic. They just really are.
People out there have said kind of if Duel of the Fates wasn't a piece of music for a film, it would be up there with like great, just like music.
Yeah, it's played at the Albert Hall and it's played at last night at the Proms. It's like a lot of his stuff, especially, can be almost reclaimed as like traditional classical music. That's how it's structured. That's how it sounds.
Very much inspired by Verdi's Requiem, and I think like the kind of the chanting that you get in Duel of the Fates is he wanted something kind of ancient and ritualistic, so it is some kind of like ritual passage from some ancient like Celtic or something that he's put it into like 3 different languages through Sanskrit and then put it back, and then it's gone like that. So it is kind of big and ritualistic and that kind of stuff. And he goes on an absolute tear and does Raiders, he does E.T., he does Jurassic Park. Schindler's List is one of their most hilarious stories ever, I think, with John Williams.
Yeah, real hilarious story, Schindler's List.
Spielberg comes up to me and goes, "I want you to do Schindler's List," because famously John Williams has only not done about 4 Spielberg movies. And John Williams watched the rough cut of the film and he goes, "I can't do this. You need a better composer than me to do this score." And Spielberg goes, "Yeah, I know, but all the others are dead, so you'll have to do." Schindler's List, and like the main theme is now regarded as one of the greatest themes ever written. Yeah. Then he goes obviously and starts off Harry Potter, which other people have taken on, but the main Harry Potter theme is now one of the most recognizable pieces of music ever. It's one of those where it's just almost anything he kind of breathes is instantly like just classic music, even above film soundtracks. It's just beautiful pieces of music. There was a thing that he was going to retire this year after Dial of Destiny came out, to focus on more orchestral, just like general classical books. At 90, you can take a rest now, mate. You don't need to do anything else in your life. Have fun for the next decade or so.
I mean, that's what Morricone ends up doing, doesn't he? I mean, like last decade of his life, he was just full-time conducting, basically. So, Hateful Eight aside, which was only about 15 minutes of music, if that. It's
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of the music for Hateful Eight, some of the Morricone stuff was originally used for The Thing. Maybe we'll come
yeah,
on to this when we get to Jacob's
yeah.
part.
I had no
But
idea about that. So,
really,
yep.
yeah, Morricone was scoring with John Carpenter for The Thing, and a lot of Morricone stuff didn't get used. And so when Tarantino came to do Hateful Eight again, contained thriller in the snow, he went to Carpenter and Morricone and went, "Can I use some of the music that you didn't?" And they went, "Yeah." And I think they kind of must have very slightly reworked it.
Well, I think he went, yeah, but yeah.
or yeah, or whatever it is in Italian, but I don't know.
You need the visual for that one. You have to watch the video to see my hand.
Okay. Or don't. It's probably better. But yeah, John Williams has now got 53 Oscar nominations and 5 wins. But the trouble is now that you do look and stuff and go, how did he not get win for this and that and that and that? Like, yeah. I don't think he got nommed for E.T.
What was his first win?
Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah, because back then they did an Oscar for, it was almost like musical adaptations. Obviously, it's not behind the musical, but he reorchestrates it for the film. So
it was for musical adaptation, yeah.
Yeah, so they had like a separate kind of Oscar category, which I think they should bring back, to be honest, because I think it is a challenge to kind of remount a well-known musical and kind of make it appropriate for like.
Yes, so it was best scoring adaptation and original song score. So he then won for Jaws and Star Wars. Actually, he did win for E.T. Okay, I mistook that. And then he won for Schindler's List. But this means that I'm actually looking now. He didn't get nommed for Jurassic Park.
Whoa. Just whoa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He didn't count. Just that in general. And you just go, how? Jurassic Park didn't get nommed. Raiders of the Lost Ark did. And then you just look at the amount of stuff. You go, Close Encounters, Superman, Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Empire of the Sun. Okay, admittedly, most of them are John Williams, Steven Spielberg, Home Alone, JFK, Schindler's List, Nixon, AI, Harry Potter, War Horse. It's just, the list goes on. He is the most nominated living person in history, which I know, again, we praise the Oscars when it supports our cause. And
wait, who's the most nominated dead person?
The most nominated person of all time is Walt Disney, with 58, 59. So theoretically, John Williams gets his act together.
But see, Disney
needs to get around to that. He's 90 now.
Disney was a producer, though. I mean, producers, they get their names on everything, don't they? So they're always up for the most awards.
Yeah. But yeah, and my final thing to one of my favorite little John Williams anecdotes is in the first Star Wars. There's a little bit of a musical motif when the Millennium Falcon comes into the Death Star and the stormtroopers come on and they look around and they leave again. And a little hatch opens on the floor and they all come out and look around. And there's a couple of notes there. There's like a 3-note leitmotif. There's a something along those lines. And it's a direct reference to Psycho. These 3 notes that you hear quite often in the score for Psycho. And the only reason that's in there is not actually because obviously he worked with Bernard Herrmann at times. It's because somebody bet him that he couldn't get the score for Psycho in Star Wars. That's the only reason. And so he went, right, I'll find a way. There we go, done that. I win the bet and moved on. To be honest, the thing with John Williams now is you could ask any film composer, were you influenced in some way by John Williams, and they'd all say yes. For, I think, probably almost any film score, and that's just the mark of the man, you know? And we don't have that long left of him, and actually, when I went to see Indiana Jones, like, when it was still going to be the last one he did, I sat through the entire credits right to the end just for the John Williams music, because at that point, we were never going to get another one. And so I sat and I just went, it's got to be done. We've got to pay the respects, because I don't think Zimmer will be to him. There will never be another John Williams ever. Yeah.
Well, there may be a lot of people named that, but yes, yeah. All right.
Mate.
Well, so I think Sam's sort of has a relation to mine, but in relation to Kieran's, Ennio Morricone is just a prolific film scorer on top of, classical orchestral composer and conductor. He scored for over 500 films, and like we mentioned, one of his last was The Hateful Eight. I think the actual last one, I will actually check and see here, was 2016's The Correspondence. But his first, he started, of course, in Italy, being an Italian guy. His first full score was in The Fascist from 1961, directed by Luciano Salci. And he did actually work with Fulci early on in his career.
He worked with pretty much anyone. If you're Italian, he'd work with you.
You got money? Yes, I will do it.
Yeah.
He did have a few works where he, worked with the orchestra, I guess, as a conductor or as a musician. I'm not sure. It says orchestrations only in notes.
It was a bit of both. I mean, I don't know if either of you guys saw the big Morricone documentary that was out last year.
I haven't yet, no.
That was filmed. Majority of it was filmed basically in the last year of his life, basically. So he's in it. He's been kind of interviews and kind of documents kind of his daily life. It's like it covers like his daily routine of morning exercises and he just comes across a very curmudgeonly genius, basically. And looking back, it comes across as like. I don't even think in the end, even though he was great at it, he didn't particularly highly value his own work in films. He accepts that brought him fame and fortune, but he much preferred his more traditional kind of orchestra work, and conducting and
Sounds very much like a composer version of Miyazaki.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like any sort of pretentious artist where they go, yeah, my commercial work, whatever. This is what I'm really passionate about.
Yes.
So I mentioned he was born in 1928. Apparently, he was reading and writing music by age 6. Although who knows what that actually means? Maybe it meant he wrote little simple melodies for multiple instruments. I don't actually know, but he started with the trumpet, studied music very, intensely from a young age. His father was a musician too. That's the person who taught him music. But he's best known for his work on spaghetti westerns. But what's funny is he only worked on 35 westerns over 300 films made between 1963 and 1980. So what he's best known for is like a fraction of what he was making in that one span. And of course, he made a few more after we talked about The Hateful Eight, which is one of the films I considered focusing on. But specifically, the Dollars trilogy is what he is best remembered for, his work with Sergio Leone in general. And he got a Grammy for his score in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It topped pop charts in the U.S. It was number 4 on the Billboard in 1968. Stayed there for about a year. I mean, it's just crazy what he was able to achieve as a classical composer making film music.
An Italian film composer as well. This is not like a big Hollywood star. This is somebody that's come out of doing cheap thrillers and pretty much just like anyone that he's just going around. He might as well just be going around with the sandwich board going, we'll score film for food,
Yeah.
And you look at the early years and he's doing like 10, 15 scores a year.
Yeah, we can all attest to just how like grimy and low budget so many of those Italian films were in the 60s. And specifically for the Dollars trilogy, they didn't have sound on set. We talked about the history of sound earlier. It didn't look like Babylon where they had someone stand under their mark. No, it was, yeah, we'll do that all in post. We don't have the budget.
Yeah, and all the easier to sell around the world and dub into other languages as well.
I was gonna say, yeah, you know they're making these films cheap. These are the kinds of films where you'd have half of the actors speaking English and half of them speaking Italian, and then you dub the other half over depending on which
Yeah.
country it is. Like,
Yeah, and actually later on for the re-release of this movie where they extended the scenes, Lee Van Cleef was dead, so they had to use another actor to do his voice. I think like there's one scene where he goes to a Confederate camp to learn about the location of Bill Carson. That's not Lee Van Cleef talking. That is, I guess, someone doing an impersonation. I don't know exactly what you would call it, but I think one of Morricone's funny stories, I learned that he had worked a little bit with Quentin Tarantino on Kill Bill and Inglourious Bastards. And he said he saw Django Unchained and was not impressed. This is from The Hollywood Reporter. To tell the truth, I didn't care for it. Too much blood. Which, you know, Tarantino's biggest inspiration is Leone. The whole thing is blood, violence. Like that's sort of the key feature of those spaghetti westerns is how dark and violent they are. And he went on to say that I wouldn't like to work with him again on anything. He told students in a music, film, and television class at Rome's, I don't know what LUISS is, but I guess it's a school in Rome. According to Italian media reports on Friday, he said last year, this is continuing the quote, he said last year he wanted to work with me again ever since Inglourious Bastards, but I told him I couldn't because he didn't give me enough time. So he just used a song I had written previously, which, oh gosh, which one of those songs? I can't see the movie over there, but there's like an impossible to find spaghetti western that the opening song in Inglourious Bastards is from. And that one stars Lee Van Cleef. It's a fun movie if you can get a hold of it.
sounds about right. Just looking at the Hateful Eight, Tarantino confirmed that the film would use 3 unused tracks from Morricone's original soundtrack for the film, titled Eternity, Bestiality, and Despair, as Morricone was pressed for time while creating the score. The final film also uses Morricone's Reagan's theme from Exorcist 2. But the funny thing is, The Thing was actually nominated, I think, for a Raspberry for Worst Score. And then The Hateful Eight wins Best Score at the Oscars. The Thing, John
which amazingly was Morricone's only Oscar win, I want to say.
Yeah, so
right
I have that here. He was nominated for Days of Heaven, which I didn't know he did that. The Mission.
Everyone was convinced he was going to get it for The Mission. He was flown out to LA. Literally, all his family were there. They read it. He'd been told basically it was in the bag, and I can't remember what won that year, but it wasn't The Mission.
Yeah, the Mission, The Untouchables, Bugsy, Milena, and then he was given an honorary Academy Award in 2007, which, I mean, that's not really a win. That's the Academy going, you have a huge body of work. We've never given you anything. Here you go. And then, he's nominated for...
That's the Academy going, you're going to be dead soon, and we want to give you something.
Yeah. And then The Hateful Eight, he does that, wins Best Original Score, finally. And like Kieran said, he was still reusing music. Tarantino, on top of not giving him enough time, Morricone said he places music in his films without coherence, and you can't do anything with something like that. But what's funny is Tarantino has been his biggest proponent, like, in the film industry. I mean, as far as like film directors go, he's the one who's like, yeah, Morricone is the guy. He is the peak. Forget John Williams. It's Morricone. And that's actually...
Which makes it all the funnier that Morricone clearly found him insufferable just to work with. I mean, just kind of try kicking and screaming inside these projects with him. I think he just wants to be left alone. It's like not do kind of all that much Hollywood stuff towards the end of his life. I think he just had enough.
Yeah, Tarantino said, as far as I'm concerned, that this January 2016 interview with Rolling Stone. He said, as far as I'm concerned, Morricone is my favorite composer. And when I say favorite composer, I don't mean movie composer, that ghetto. I'm talking about Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert. And the author goes on to say, the impact of Morricone's music remains legendary. No other composer was so able to adapt and at creating an indelible, unforgettable atmosphere. And I think that's what makes The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, out of his 500 movies, that's what makes it so special. It really brings the atmosphere to the film. I listened to a few other Western film scores from a few different, decades, ranging from like the 40s to the 60s. And so many of those are the classic orchestral sound. In The Searchers, there is the sort of nylon string Spanish sounding guitar, but it's rhythmic and it's just there to underscore what's going on with the brass music and the trumpet and the woodwinds. I listened to Red River. That's a great soundtrack, but it's very much a sort of classical Hollywood score. And Magnificent Seven has a great theme, but it's still in that vein. And what Morricone did was he brought in those unique instruments, I think. Maybe not unique to films in general. I don't know how big electric guitar was in 1960s films, but it really stands out in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in a way that there's just nothing similar to it in other Western movies from the sort of previous era, American Western movies, Hollywood ones, I guess I should say, because the spaghetti Westerns are the taking the American mythology of the West, and then mythologizing it as cinema history, as opposed to, Western American history. And so the big thing with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, there's three major pieces and one that is sort of played on across the film. And by the way, I did read I found this article. It is from, if I could find it, this guy's WordPress, Oysen Carlin, Audio and Music Production. I'll throw it up here. I read it. I'm not, music literate these days. I played band in middle school, but
you have a guitar behind you.
Yes, the days of like really understanding music, specifically sort of orchestral music, far behind me.
I was going to say my GCSE music I got 10 years ago, and as much as I've tried to keep in, like, going to concerts is about it.
Yeah, I could play chords, I can pick out tunes, I can read tabs and play songs, but that is about it. I'm not advanced in any way. But the main theme, of course, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's got three different sort of features within it. It mimics a coyote, and I also think a sort of native like war cry, which I don't see mentioned often, but that's the wow, wow, wow. Yes, and like
you gotta have the call and response.
Yes, absolutely.
Are we being struck for copyright now?
We should be. That was spot on by me.
Yep.
So that with that main theme, resembling the howling of a coyote, a distinctive Western sound, which, by the way, I see them on the road so much. It alive and dead. It's very sad. What
do you ever hear them making that sound?
No. I hear dogs making similar howls, but the coyotes is so distinct. But yeah, he incorporates that sound with the call and response, and like Jaws, it's just a 2-note trill, right? It's wah 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 wah, and it's simple. It doesn't stray too far from those sort of simple, I don't know, melodies, whatever they are. And each character has their own distinct instrument that represents them within the song. So it's a flute for Blondie, or the man with no name. Although upon watching this, I contend that this isn't actually part of the Dollars Trilogy universe, that he's playing a completely separate character who just happens to be very similar to the Drifter. I've seen it called a prequel, but it's just so different in story and tone that I'm not convinced it's exactly the same. And then and he's the good, by the way. The bad, Angel Eyes, Lee Van Cleef's character. He gets the ocarina. I don't know if I can make that specific sound. I'm trying to describe it in my notes. I just put, it's kind of like a whistle.
Go play Zelda. Moving on.
And then for the ugly, Tuco, who is the star of the show, by the way. This is Tuco's movie. It's not about Blondie at all.
Eli Wallach was just so kind of underrated in general. He just lit up the screen. Bless him.
Yeah, and he looks like I didn't know really who Eli Wallach was. You're saying he's underrated. Doing a bit more research, I was like, whoa, that guy's American. I thought he was one of the Italian actors in this movie. Yeah. He blends in so well, playing a Mexican guy. But that's the one that uses the human voice, wah 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 version of that. But also,
strike number 2.
One thing I noticed was that Blondie and Tuco, due to their partnership, I guess, they both get that wah 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 sound, while for Angel Eyes it's boom 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 on guitar. So I haven't.
Well, considering we did that about 3 times, thank you for listening. We're about to get taken down by YouTube.
Yeah. But he doesn't just, have that one theme, which is played on across the film, developed, representing the characters, the situations that they're in. There's also the piece played at the Civil War POW camp, whenever they get Tuco and Blondie are taken prisoner by the Union Army, and they get Tuco gets tortured. They're playing this Civil War song called "The Story of a Soldier." And I think that's a really good piece that fits the setting of the film during the American Civil War. By the way, another funny thing about this movie is its complete lack of comment on the American Civil War, and I appreciate that as a sort of non-American perspective on it. It's just kind of two sides are fighting, and they don't care one way or the other about either of them. And then they have the two. Maybe just the Ecstasy of Gold is the real major one. It's used in commercials. It's played by Metallica and all kinds of bands. Song. Yeah, and Kieran, do you want to give us that one? Okay, can you sing that one for me?
Yeah, just go. See Metallica. Just go see Metallica, and then also you get an entire Metallica show as well.
And it's so good in the way. Sorry, Kieran or Sam.
I mean, I was just gonna say I'm going to talk when I come on to Hans Zimmer how indebted and influenced he was, by to Morricone, but to the extent that in the third Pirates of the Caribbean, he literally does his own take on that kind of general theme, like the face off on the beach, with Davy Jones and the East India trading company guy, when they're all lining up basically for their face off on the beach. It's got a very, very, it isn't the same music, but you know what he's doing, you know what he's referencing.
I think you'll find the name is Lord Cutler Beckett. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the Ecstasy of Gold is played as Tuco's running through the graveyard trying to find the Blondie had told him a name earlier. I think it was like Andrew Stanton or something. And so he goes looking for that one grave, and he finally finds it, and that's when the piece hits its crescendo of pure ecstasy regarding gold. And then, of course, they dig up the body. It's just a skeleton, which the guy died just months prior. The movie takes place the year that the guy died, and he is a full skeleton. So they couldn't.
Welcome to Texas.
Actually, it's in New Mexico. I learned
Oh,
that
I'm
as
sorry.
well. I assumed it was in Texas prior to actually like reading about it. Um, but yeah,
It's down south somewhere.
yeah, exactly. Not in the UK. And so
Or Italy.
or Italy. Yeah, it's in Spain, really, if you think about it. Um, there was so many films shot in that one area of Spain. I learned that too. Like so many movies and spaghetti westerns in particular. But yeah, so right after that, Angel Eyes shows up. He's got a gun on both of them, and that's when Blondie pulls out. Oh, look, there's the grave. There's nobody in it. I know the actual name. I'm gonna write it here on this rock and put it in the middle of that field, and we're gonna decide who gets this gold. And so they wander into that circle and create the Mexican standoff, and that's when we get the trio, which is I'm not going to sing the whole thing, but it's the mariachi trumpet, along with, I think the guitar is playing that sort of Ecstasy of Gold intro bit, so sort of connecting those two pieces, and God, it's so great. And of course, in that scene, Blondie shoots and kills Angel Eyes, and Tuco discovers that Blondie unloaded his pistol to, I guess, keep him from killing him in a sense, helping him maintain control over the situation. But yeah, Angel Eyes dies. They retrieve the gold. Tuco is nearly hanged, but then shot down once again by Blondie, like earlier in the movie. And he runs off into the sunset with the gold as Tuco stands there yelling for him, cursing his name. And the trio, I also found out, is used as an interlude on a Lana Del Rey album. She repurposed it, sampled it with a trap beat over it. So, yeah,
like you do.
Jesse, she was watching the movie with me, and she was like, "That sounds like a Lana Del Rey song." And so we looked it up, and yeah, used that. So yeah, I think the big thing to take away from the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly score is like it's so integral to the movie. It was actually written before the movie, which is a fun fact. They played it on set to help people like get into character and understand the feeling and performance that they should give, and
which you can also do if you're going to add all the dialogue afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think another fun thing about the soundtrack, the incorporation of the gunshots and the whips and just all of those unique sounds that, surely somebody else had done something similar previously, but he did it in a way that was just so interesting for the Western genre. And, I had to go seek out and listen to these other soundtracks, but I've heard the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly within pop culture, within culture in general. It's so influential and important. The title, we use the title constantly. In the Anglosphere, at least. I don't know if in Italy they use the Italian phrase very often, but it just easily for me the best film score. As much as I love Star Wars, and the Jaws one is great, I love.
And somehow we've got this far and haven't mentioned Lord of the Rings, which I personally think, despite John Williams, is the best film score for a film. Anyway, on the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, my two notes are, I think one of the things that Morricone does well is that a lot of the instrumentation is, until kind of the big orchestra builds up, it is quite minimal, and quite kind of lonesome and just like a breath, and it gives that kind of expansive feel by not having a kind of really thick kind of timbre to it. It's quite empty, thick texture. When you think about the flute and the ocarina and even the kind of lone kind of steel guitar, it's very, and it gives the kind of wide kind of expanse to the Western that you get, and especially when you get to like the ending, that big wide, the three of them stood there. It feels like that. And then just a note that you were saying earlier, before the Good, and Bad, the Ugly, you had kind of traditional kind of orchestral scores that are really great. But then after 1966, every Western score is just the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it's now done. It just came on and went, yeah, that's great. This is now how you do it from now on, and everyone just kind of agreed and went, yep, okay, right.
And
And we
especially
have
if
to
you're
riff off
Quentin
that at some point.
Tarantino, where it's
Yeah,
literally
and
Ennio Morricone.
yeah, and Tarantino we know borrowed from everyone, especially Italy. The kind of start of Kill Bill Volume One borrows from Seven Notes in Black, which was a Fabio Frizzi score. Who, hilariously enough, if you want, because it's obviously Italian, goes all the way around. Fabio Frizzi scored a lot of Lucio Fulci movies. Who else scored Lucio Fulci movies? Ennio Morricone. So pretty much anyone from Italy, it just goes around like that. And obviously Morricone scored people like Argento, and literally anyone in Italy that would pay him, he scored. It's just like that. He is the kind of composing equivalent of Donald Pleasance. Will work for money.
And
That's kind of how it works. Big films, tiny ones with interval budgets. Yeah, we'll go.
my last note is I was probably sort of formally introduced to Morricone through Tarantino, which is part of why I'm bringing him up. The other part is the sort of Morricone scholarship doesn't shy away from talking about him and the way that he didn't popularize him, but kept him in the consciousness of modern film. And of course, he also took the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and that's the end of Reservoir Dogs. It's people with guns in a standoff. And I don't know if
that's all Tarantino movies.
That's true. I don't know if I would have been introduced to spaghetti westerns and all of that without him. Maybe I would have, because my dad had seen Trinity and stuff on TV. But yeah, thank you, Tarantino, in a way.
And finally,
so I'm talking. Well, I've got the most recent of the three composers. Even though Hans Zimmer has already had a 45-year career himself, so it's not that recent, but comparatively.
Sam, I thought you were going to pick Danny Elfman, so this wasn't out of left field, but that was my guess for you.
You thought I was going to pick John Carpenter, who I did think of.
Yeah, I mean, I do like Danny Elfman, don't get me wrong, but yeah, no, I think Zimmer's probably had more of a stronger impact on me in kind of especially more recent years. But yeah, so Hans Florian Zimmer, born 12th of September 1957 in Germany.
By the way, I like how we're giving what year they were born. We don't do that for any directors.
No, it's not painfully obvious.
We should start.
We've all copied and pasted the first line from the Wikipedia page onto our notes.
Oh, come on, all our facts from Wikipedia.
Yeah. So he's won 2 Oscars for The Lion King and for June, and 4 Grammys, 2 for The Lion King, 1 for Crimson Tide, 1 for The Dark Knight. And he's also been nominated for 3 Emmys and a Tony. So, he's not quite up there with, and obviously many more nominations besides, not quite up there with like John Williams in terms of the sheer number, but, he hasn't been going for quite as long as John Williams either. I mean, one thing that occurs to me while you're both talking, all 3 of our guys are the sons of musician parents, aren't they? Because Hans Zimmer, his mum was a pianist, and his dad, in his own words, was an abysmal jazz clarinetist.
I guess it helps you be a good musician when your parents can teach you early on. Like my niece, her mom is a teacher, and so she can already write letters and read a little bit at 4.
Apparently Hans really resented piano lessons, which his mum insisted on him doing, when he was young, because obviously that's kind of the upbringing she had, and that's how she got to where she was. But he really resented playing other people's music and being told how to play the piano when he just wanted to go off and do his own thing and create his own kind of work. From the
apparently, start. I'm not sure if it's still the case, but for a long portion of his career, he couldn't actually read sheet music.
Yeah, I think even now he uses programs to kind of set out his notes and stuff. He uses a software to assist him in terms of actually putting the notes down, and manipulating it and stuff. So he likes using technology for that kind of thing. But he began his career in the 70s in a number of bands. So it didn't start off as a serious composer. He was in a variety of like electronic and new wave bands. He was in the Buggles briefly. He can be seen in the famous video for "Video Killed the Radio Star." The first music video on MTV. He's the miserable looking guy in black on the keyboard.
Side note, that's also how Joe Pesci started his career, just playing in bands.
Yeah.
Also, how Danny Elfman started.
Yeah.
He's in Oingo Boingo.
Didn't Danny Elfman appear at Glastonbury a couple of years ago? It's like
very
it's
possibly.
Like a special appearance.
I think so. Yeah.
Basically ripped his shirt off and got a guitar out and just started just thrashing around. It's like, good on him.
I mean, yes, why not?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with yes.
Yeah, so he worked with the Buggles. He worked with the Italian group Charisma, apparently, and he was the featured like synthesist on in that band. So I think he was with them for a while, and he worked for another band, Helden, who with Warren Cann from Ultravox. So he got around. He never stuck to one thing for too long. He got kind of his place in like the musical world. Through like popular music, and then eventually kind of he moved to London, started working in various studios and like as a session musician, and then eventually got into film composing. And like his like big breakthrough was Rain Man, apparently. After that, things really like took off for him. So from like the late 80s onwards, especially into the 90s, that's when he became like the Hans Zimmer kind of what we know and love. One of his more obscure things. I was at Coachella. I was thinking of. Sorry, James.
You did something. That you guys will be able to see that we won't.
Yeah. I mean, one reference that'll probably go completely over everyone's head who's not in the UK. I mean, it'll probably go over mine and Kieran's head as well because it's a bit before our time. But one of his early kind of hits that basically paid his bills for a long time was composing the theme tune for the TV game show Going for Gold.
I haven't seen it, but I know of it.
Yeah, and he said about that, it's the sort of stuff you do when you don't have a career yet.
Yeah, Bill Bailey's one of his old things was he used to work as a session musician, putting the sounds on to teach yourself French records. The bing, ding, ding, that kind of thing. What you gotta do?
Yeah, I mean, basically over the last 30 years, especially, kind of, I would say he's probably like the kind of big composer. He's sort of almost kind of overtaken like John Williams in that regard, especially in terms of like popular cinema. And he's best known for obviously for music that can for music that conveys like a certain kind of epic scale. So films like Gladiator, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dune. Kind of his kind of memorable kind of genre work, especially like superhero films, especially like popular Man of Steel. Did Sherlock Holmes as well for Guy Ritchie. And then the odd kind of was that him kind of score? I mean, you kind of forgiven for forgetting, even though he got the Oscar for it, that he did The Lion King. That he's obviously everyone thinks of like the songs, composed by like Elton John, Tim Rice, but the score for it, and like all the kind of the African music in that. I mean, he discovered Lee Bohem, and got him obviously to sing that iconic, like opening kind of chants, and like just earlier this year, he randomly did "Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret." It's like the guy who does like big epic music. It's brought into it's got like really intimate little kind of coming of age story. So he is versatile. There's probably his more kind of sonically kind of experimental kind of work is kind of probably most interesting, like especially stuff he does with Christopher Nolan. So things like Inception, Interstellar, and Dunkirk. I mean, he's a big fan of like dropping a bit like Morricone to an extent. I mean, this is where the comparison comes from. He likes dropping like a weird kind of instruments into like a quite traditional kind of orchestration. So he Wonder Woman's theme in Batman vs Superman is on an electric cello. You know that, you know, so that's an electric cello. You've got use the theremin on Man of Steel, the banjo on Sherlock Holmes, and the bagpipes on Dune. So he likes just picking up a random instrument and just kind of making his soundtracks a little bit more a little bit kind of more unique. I mean, he's kind of he's worked a fair few times with like with some of his favorite directors. You know, so Christopher Nolan 6 times. Ridley Scott 6 times, Ron Howard 8 times. I mean, I always forget he did all like the Da Vinci Code, Rob Langdon films for some reason.
Did he do A Beautiful Mind?
I think so. Yes. He did Gore Verbinski 6 times and Denis Villeneuve 3 times so far, including the upcoming Dune Part 2.
He did the Ring soundtrack.
He did the Ring soundtrack.
Wow.
He also did A Thin Red Line.
Yeah, and again, go back to Morricone. He did a Rango, you know, the Gore Verbinski's animated western. That's like that's a bit like
Mad
Shane
Max too.
It's a bit like Shane meets Chinatown, but everyone's in a western town and they're all lizards.
Wow. Yeah, looking over this like list of animated movies that he did.
Kung Fu Panda,
Spirit,
Madagascar,
Shark Tale.
Yeah.
God, what a versatile guy. That's awesome.
I know. I mean, it has said in interviews that like the scores of Ennio Morricone
The Simpsons.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, did he do the Simpsons movie, or is he? Because I know obviously Danny Elfman did the original theme, you know, for the show, but then kind of stepped back. But yeah, I think he got brought into the movie. I think. But yeah, he's cited Morricone, but especially Once Upon a Time in the West as the score that most inspired him to become a film composer himself. And I'd say that's personally my favorite Morricone score, Once Upon a Time in the West. So for me, I think his best stuff is the stuff he's done with Christopher Nolan, really, because I think he never does the same score twice, and he's always kind of playing around, experimenting with them. And for me, I think Sherlock Holmes was that was him when he did that with Guy Ritchie. That was like that was him kind of taking quite a traditional kind of like blockbuster genre score, and then kind of just throwing in a bit of oddity to kind of mark it out. But yeah, I think with Nolan, I think he has a general idea about the kind of mood he's going for, but essentially just says, "Look, Hans, just go play. I trust you. You know, bring something interesting back, and I'll find some use for it."
I mean, he is. I don't think any other composer has changed film trailers quite the way.
Well, okay.
Hans Zimmer has.
Well, let's bring up the bwam of it all. That's hang on, I just need to find the right quote for that. Yeah, here we go. So that's what he's known for, and people say, yeah, it's like that's all you hear in trailers now. But that's down to Christopher Nolan's marketing. Christopher Nolan is a really good marketer of his films, and kind of he knows kind of how to kind of capture the zeitgeist and what to show, what not to, and everything. But that famous sound from the
that wasn't Zimmer, was it?
That wasn't Zimmer. That's not in the film. There is a similar sound in some of the music in the film itself, like a foghorn or something. But the one from the trailer was composed, especially for the trailer, by Zach Hemsey, and it's appeared in many other trailers since that. But that's what people think of. But really, it's I think it's more sophisticated than that. Zimmer, and kind of he layers his soundtracks a lot more, and kind of how he plays around with like electronic music and combines it with like traditional orchestration. So Inception for me is kind of his kind of quintessential kind of soundtrack, I suppose. And I think Christopher Nolan's films are often accused of being quite cold, you know, kind of more about ideas and in-camera spectacle ahead of like the emotions, you know, the audience meant to feel. But as well as being like one of his more metaphysical works, it's probably one of his more character-based and kind of more kind of soulful stories. Because essentially, for all like the head screwing ideas, you know, it's like all the idea of invading someone's dreams, implanting an idea, and having to heist your way in and heist your way out again without losing your marbles. Essentially, it's a film about like a troubled, grieving man taking the long way round back to his family. Essentially, I mean that's essentially what it is. And I think Zimmer's score is kind of essential in kind of maintain that like emotional connectivity, and as well as like the visual signifiers, like the color palette and the film speed and certain kind of choice in terms of like the effects. It's his score that kind of ties all these layers of the dreams together into like one cohesive like whole. I mean, one thing I rewatched this, especially for this podcast, and one thing that struck me more so this time around, it's like, everyone thinks like I mean, kind of a couple of tracks I kind of picked out. Like everyone thinks like the dream is collapsing, which is like the one he uses for all the action scenes. Essentially, it kind of steadily builds and builds and builds, like crescendos, and so it's very effective for like maintaining that kind of tension and like the scale of the thing. And then other people also think of Time, which is like the last track in the film here, and that's not where the whole story is coming full circle and Cobb's back to his family, and there's that ambiguity at the end, about whether it is and isn't a dream, but that's like the kind of the emotional kind of high points and like the conclusion of the whole thing. But essentially, what these guys are doing, these dream heist guys, essentially the breaking into someone's minds and to implant a memory, because that's what I'm employed to do. The target is Robert Fisher, played by Cillian Murphy, who's like the put upon, very troubled kind of son of a billionaire kind of energy baron, and they're trying to implant the idea to when his dad dies to kind of split up his empire. So essentially, all these other slightly smaller engine companies can swoop in and kind of still be kind of competitors in the field. Essentially, what they're doing with him, they're lying to him to implant this idea. They've got to. What I gather is his dad, played by Pete Postlethwaite, in one of his final roles, basically. I think it is as simple as it sounds. He detests his son. He doesn't care about him, doesn't love him, and he just wants to. And he is kind of disappointed, that he hasn't become like more like him over the years. But they kind of implant the idea that it wasn't his disappointment in him. It was his father's disappointment in the fact that he was trying to be him. So kind of to provide him with like a bit of catharsis and kind of provide him with like motivation to kind of to do what they want to do. And that kind of comes to a head with like Hans Zimmer's track, which is titled 528491, which is the code that Cillian Murphy's character puts in the safe to, in theory, to see his father's last will in testament, but in reality, he gets a message basically that his father always loved him, that he treasured this paper propeller thing, from this image from their childhood. But it's a really tragic track because it's like from Cillian Murphy's like performance and from kind of everything they've been through and everything. It's like he's getting this catharsis, and there's a reference earlier on saying they talk about how to pull off this heist, and they say we all yearn for reconciliation, for catharsis. We need to make him believe that my father accepts that what I create for myself is more important than me following in his footsteps. Which isn't true. It's like, as I say, it's like his father, I think, probably wants him more like him, but they've basically said, kind of implied this idea that, maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe he really did love me, which I really don't think he did. So it's like the combination with this, it's kind of it's kind of a victory moment because they're succeeding in their mission. It's kind of they're getting what they want, and Cillian Murphy's obviously gets something out. His character gets something out of it. He's kind of crying his eyes out. That thinking his father actually loved him. But really, it's based on a complete lie, and this this idea, this number they've put into his head. That he's made that connection to something that's not actually kind of real. I think the track, which is very kind of, it's probably the most traditionally orchestrated kind of the tracks. It's very kind of high strings and everything like that to kind of bring out the emotions. And I think that scene, you might be kind of thinking at that point, it's like you might be basically not beyond like the um, the team size at that point. You might think, oh god, that they're horrible. They've got this really screwed up person, to just believe this lie, But you kind of his kind of score kind of the emotions carry through, so you're with him at that point. You think, oh, maybe this is so bad. Maybe this is giving him some kind of a release to an extent. I don't know. I mean, he does use like he manipulates like electronically, quite a bit throughout his scores, and it might be quite traditional to an extent, and then he'll tweak them a bit and make them a bit weird. I mean, famously in Inception, he uses Edith Piaf's Je ne regrette rien quite prominently, and use the timing in that and a couple of notes from that throughout, and weaves it into a score. I mean, I think there was a video kind of deconstructing it like a few months after the film came out, and they kind of almost like saying it's like, is Hans Zimmer plagiarizing Edith Piaf? And Hans Zimmer was like, well, no, that was completely intentional. I had it in my mind from the start. And Christopher Nolan wants him to take it out at first because he kind of thought, well, we've got Marion Cotillard in this film, and she has just played Edith Piaf and got an Oscar for it. It's like people might not be making that connection, but he kind of persuaded Nolan and said, no, it's too key to it. It kind of weaves throughout and kind of works real well, kind of on an emotional level for the film.
Sam, I don't want to jump on anything you're about to get to, but
yep.
does focusing on the soundtrack this time, do you think the music gives any clues to the answer of, is Leo in a dream or is he in reality with the top spinning?
I mean, the track, kind of you hear it at the beginning and end of the film, and it does sort of seem to waver a bit along with the top, just before it cuts to black. It's almost like the tracks on like a knife's edge, and it's almost like it does. There's like a clean break at the end. I mean, to be honest, I always think people are asking the wrong questions really about Inception. It's like it's never going to be concretely answered. You can read it however you like. I mean, I always think if you want to know if it's a dream or not, I think they probably focus on the wrong. The end scene with the top isn't the key one. The one you want to focus on is much earlier on, where Leo drops the top in the bathroom after he wakes up from testing that really powerful new drug.
And it's not even his totem.
Yes, one, it's Mel's totem, which he's using throughout. Yes, it doesn't work for him, who knows? And also, he's he doesn't spin it properly in that scene, and kind of you don't see it land, and he just scoops it up and walks off. So you don't even know. He could have been dreaming at any point of it, to be honest. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's about the. Because again, I think Emma Thomas, Christopher Nolan's wife and producing partner. He admitted, because he said that's the question he gets asked the most, about the end of Inception. And he said during the pandemic, apparently she gave him the best answer that he'd never thought of, and he's going to use it in every interview since. And he says, well, does it matter? Surely, if that's the happy ending for that character, isn't that the most important thing? At that point, he doesn't care if it's reality or not, really, because he's got his happy ending.
That's been my answer for years. Everyone's like, he's still in a dream. It's another layer, and it's well, what does that add to the story? Exactly. The story of it is been completed. You're now just trying to add stuff which isn't naturally there, just for the point of making an argument.
I mean, there's a tragedy of Mel's character, obviously, where she's, she was convinced that she was still asleep, that she was still dreaming, so she committed suicide, and that's kind of his guilt, because he gave her that idea originally that maybe their world wasn't real. And again, it does all ties back to, I think Zimmer's score kind of punctuates all these moments and kind of dials everything up. Because I think without the music, it would feel quite clinical, and it would be very ideasy and very kind of impressive intellectually, but I don't think you'd quite have that connection in quite the same way.
I mean, I was just gonna say, I've always, you know me, I'm not the biggest Zimmer fan in the world, especially his kind of more recent stuff.
Yeah.
He's obviously done a lot of stuff in the past, which is great. And now, to me, it kind of all sounds like he's just got the string section on a keyboard and gone, vum, 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 vum. There we go, that'll do.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, especially with things like Dune,
Yeah.
he won the Oscar, but I couldn't give you a single note from Dune at all.
Not even the bagpipe. Not even the bagpipes bits.
I forgot there was bagpipes in it. Wouldn't know. But he doesn't. I don't think he now creates scores. I've heard it described as soundscapes, and that's what he does. It's an atmosphere rather than an orchestration, and he's very good at that. I'll give him that. But I am very much a traditionalist. I want my orchestra. I want my leitmotifs and my melodies flopping around and stuff.
Is the musical soundscape really inferior to a more traditional music piece? I mean, it's just a different way of using it.
Yeah, it works, and I'm not going to give him that. But at the same time, I'm there going, I couldn't tell you a single note from anything like that. But like, there's so many where, it feels like music to me. And I like music. But I'm just opinionated. So
go back to Morricone, kind of putting like an electric guitar like when you don't expect it to. There are like a few quite distinct kind of guitar riffs like throughout, and they're provided by the Smiths' Johnny Marr, who I was lucky enough to again see that time when I saw Zimmer, because he. It was a really interesting show actually, because he basically worked pretty much through his career, and just he was there throughout, just holding the whole thing together like a front man for this most incredible like bands, he kind of so he's on keyboard throughout, and then it was like, and we'll bring out some guest stars. So here's Johnny Marr to do a track with me. Here's Lee Boehm to do a track with me, and he was just kind of. Because I think it's one thing like sitting in a studio, kind of making your score and kind of or conducting your orchestra and everything like that. Obviously not by no means easy, but it's one skill. But it's kind of go back to like almost like his rock star days and kind of front an orchestra, but like a front man of like a rock band. So it's like he was like playing keyboard throughout, but often multi-instrumental. He was a multi-instrumentalist at the time, so he was playing keyboard, and then for like the Man of Steel theme, he kind of did like the main kind of few note thing on the keyboard, and then reached over to wave his hand at the theremin, to make the weird screechy sound, and then like he ended one track on the keyboard, then immediately jumped up, grabbed a banjo, and then started playing Sherlock Holmes. It's just the transitions like from one to another was incredible, and it really brought across like his versatility and like the number of kind of different things he's tried kind of over the years. So that's
I don't know why, but I'm picturing a less grotesque Phantom of the Paradise.
Yeah, pretty much. Not far off that. I mean, he's kind of he's had some interesting little quotes, like talking about like why does it kind of just he said just for the game of it, just because I enjoy doing it. I'm just getting started. When he was asked at 65 was he thinking about retiring, it's like no, he's going to keep going till the keel's over basically.
If he wanted a music pun, he should have said just for the bell of it. But
yes, exactly, yeah.
Just on that very quickly, I'm going to ask a question about Zimmer's future.
Yeah.
Considering he jumped in to score No Time to Die, and considering there are continuing rumors that Nolan is going to direct the next Bond, will there be a reuniting of Nolan and Zimmer for the next two Bond movies?
I would imagine so. If those rumors are true, that would be.
Are they rumors or are they fan casting a director?
I mean, he's very publicly expressed his love of the Bond films.
They are his favourite movies, hence Inception, hence Tenet, which are just Bond movies.
But to be honest, I can't imagine Eon and whoever owns Eon now. Is it still Sony or is it MGM now?
I thought it was Amazon now.
Oh, okay. Yes, it is, because Amazon bought MGM, didn't they? Yeah, okay. Anyway, I can't imagine them giving someone like Nolan enough stylistic freedom, really.
The rumours are that is essentially one of the main sticking points of how much freedom Nolan gets.
Yeah.
Considering Oppenheimer was literally Universal bought him off Warner Brothers and went, "We're going to give you a load of money. You do what you want. Just make a movie for us, and we'll go off your name." Part of me really hopes he does it because at the very least you're going to get a spectacle.
Yeah.
Sam, I'll let you get to your next quote, but also on his future. This is how I learned Mufasa the Lion King prequel is coming out, which somehow features Timon and Pumbaa.
Directed by Barry Jenkins.
Yeah, what a weird movie that's going to be. And like, how long do not groundhogs, whatever Timon is, and warthogs live? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Pumbaa is apparently going to be played by Seth Rogen.
He already was in the first one.
He was.
Was
in
it?
the live
I
one,
blocked
yeah.
that first one out of my mind, to be honest, because it's just the '94 version, but with worse animation.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much.
Sorry,
nothing
Sam.
new.
But because newsflash, photoreal animals can't emote.
Yeah.
Yeah, very unsettling. What's your next quote?
I mean, yes. So he's been quite kind of self-deprecating, kind of over the years. You know, like I mean, just talk about like what he did to get kind of do the Edith Piaf thing. You know, in the Inception soundtracks, like I had to go and extract these 2 notes out of a recording. I love technology, so it was a lot of fun for me to go and get the original master out of the French National Archives and then find some crazy scientist in France who would actually go and take that one cell out of the DNA. I mean, he did have just, this isn't related to Inception, but just a random quote of, I think an interview talked to him about, asked him about why does he use a banjo on Sherlock Holmes? Which is, again, I've got mixed feelings about the director of Sherlock Holmes, but his score for it is very fun. He talked about, he says, the definition of a gentleman is someone who knows how to play the banjo, but refrains from doing so.
Does that mean I need a banjo?
That sounds like something you'd say about bagpipes too.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I've a whole lot more really on Zimmer, but you know, he is one of my favorite composers. So I love all the stuff he does with Nolan. Back in the day, I loved obviously what Ridley Scott. You know, things like Gladiator, especially. I don't think anyone kind of any modern composer really can make anything sound quite as epic as he does.
And it sounds like he actually appreciates his film work and isn't like, well, that's not my real stuff.
Yeah. I wouldn't say he'd ever dismiss it because that's basically all he's got. You know, what's he going to fall back on? Oh, I much preferred when I was like a session musician for a band.
Video killed the radio star.
Obscurity. I mean, the Buggles had like some, they've had some staying power, but I don't think any of the other bands he was part of really that fondly remembered. Oh shit, he did Top Gun Maverick as well, didn't he? How about that?
And Blade Runner 2049 with somebody else, which that one at least you can tell.
Yes.
Because there are some bombs in there. And you go, is this something like just Hans Zimmer on like synth? It was like, okay, yes, it is Hans Zimmer on synth.
Yeah.
It's the session musician.
You suspect like his Dark Knight trilogy, especially The Dark Knight, you know, which he did with James Newton Howard. And for the longest of time, weren't eligible for Oscar nomination until they backtracked on that, because apparently you can't have 2 composers up for the same prize for some reason. But anyway, you suspect in that one that like the more experimental, uncomfortable stuff, especially the Joker music, you know, of all that kind of electronic scraping sounds and like eerie kind of whirring and stuff. That feels very Zimmer to me. That those kind of tracks, anything's kind of get under your skin a bit. Yeah,
that made me look up that there's the film composer union is the premier organization for music creators working in visual media, or the Society of Composers and they're called the Society of Composers and Lyricists. They are the premier organization for music creators working in visual media. So I guess we'll complain to them about not being able to have 2 composers.
Yeah, I mean, that was back 2008. I mean, I don't know whether they've changed the rules since. Wouldn't be surprised if they had. But
Nice.
yeah, looking forward to many more compositions from Mr. Zimmer. I mean, fun fact, a couple months back, I just remembered this actually. I went to see an orchestra play a medley of Hans Zimmer and John Williams music, which was quite special. And they married quite well together. Might be surprised to hear, but
Or not so surprised to hear.
yeah, I don't know. It's just because they are very different. They've got very different takes on film music, but probably achieve the same effects just in different ways, I suppose.
Before this all stops, I do want to just quickly go. I do realize that we have not, I think, name dropped a single female composer in an hour and a half.
The joke composer Hilda.
Yeah, he's won the Oscar.
I can't pronounce the surname. I'm sorry. Gotthilda?
Something like that. Yeah, people like Rachel Portman, Anne Dudley, Debbie Wiseman, and that. They are all. I have not listened to their stuff enough to be able to kind of identify them, but I know the names and know that they are very well regarded. And
Hilda. Nope, seeing the name in front of me doesn't help either.
Yeah.
To be fair to me, we've named the only 5 composers I can name. So
Hilda Guanajuato. I don't know. Anyway, she did. She did. What she did as well?
Borderless Sun, hilariously enough, which is like proper like drone metal, where almost like there's about 4 notes over about 5 minutes. It's hilarious.
Yes. Oh, of course, she did Tower and Women Talking. So yeah, she had a very good 2022 as well.
James says not allowing the same composer to be nominated twice would be why Williams wasn't for Jurassic Park, as it would be the same Oscars as Schindler's List.
Good point. Good point. James,
would they be a year apart though?
No, they were 93 both.
They're both 93.
Jurassic Park was 92.
No, it was 93.
Was it?
Yeah.
How come they're 92 then?
Oh, a lot of stuff.
I'm like completely losing my mind.
Yeah. No.
So
I've always put down 92.
Yeah, they're both 93, and because Spielberg needed the therapy of editing Jurassic Park after filming Schindler's List all day.
So I'm looking at the Oscar eligibility rules. As far as like, can you only have one composer nominated per like movie? So the work must be the result of a creative interaction between the filmmakers and composers or songwriters. A score must be created specifically for the eligible feature-length motion picture and comprises a minimum of 35% of the total music in the film. But you could have an appeal if it's less. I would
like to point out that some of those regulations on kind of reusing music is why Howard Shore wasn't nommed for Two Towers, because a substantial portion of it was used in Fellowship of the Ring, so he didn't get nommed for Two Towers, though he did for Fellowship, and he did win for Return of the King as well.
Well, in cases such as sequels and franchises, the score must consist of more than 80% newly composed music, which does not contain any pre-existing themes borrowed from previous scores in the franchise. The work must be recorded for the use in the motion picture prior to any other usage, including public performance.
Which I suppose makes sense for Williams' scores, like the special Star Wars and Indiana Jones, they kind of, obviously got the main themes in there and obviously opening, closing credits, but otherwise, they're pretty distinct, the kind of the individual soundtracks, I suppose. But before we wrap up, shall we all go around and name our favourite scores from each of these 3 composers?
Sure. I'll start. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is one. Star Wars, the original that I refuse to call A New Hope, for Williams. And oh gosh, I mean, I was looking through the list of Hans Zimmer, and like it's so many things, so many movies. But I'd probably go Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, I love the music in that movie.
Yep. I mean, he only really did the second one on second and third by himself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The first one, he was musical supervisor, and it was one of his proteges who did
Klaus Badelt, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's the one.
And he said that guy did a terrible job. It's my turn.
Yeah.
Well, I think he was kind of working on several other things, so he kind of got the main bits down and went Klaus Badelt polish it up.
Thing. Yeah.
Polish it up, and which is why on the soundtrack it comes under Klaus Badelt.
Yeah.
Well, then I'll go with Pirates 2 then, because I like that one.
Oh yeah, I mean, you get all the Davy Jones stuff in that, all the organ music. I mean,
and the Kraken
with tentacles.
Yeah. Kieran, what about you?
John Williams, I'm gonna have to say Philosopher's Stone, because I've grown up with it so much. My parents, like, bearing in mind I was like 4 or 5 when it came out, my parents had the CD of it. And like when we were on holiday, that's what they used to play when we were going to sleep. I used to play it when we were going to sleep. So like, yeah, it's ingrained in me on a personal note. So despite Star Wars and everything, it's going to be Harry Potter.
For our American listeners, that's the Sorcerer's Stone. In case you're confused.
The reason for the change is genuinely the producers didn't think the American audience would know what a philosopher was, and therefore Sorcerer was better. That's not like a kind of joke that we say. That is the genuine producer reason, which I still find hilarious. Morricone, yes, I will say Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because it's so much. And for Zimmer, I probably Pirates of the Caribbean. Again, we had the original... Yep. The first one on CD as well, so I played that. And if that is discounted, I will say Inception.
Yeah. Okay, yep. So for Zimmer, yep, I will say Inception, because I think it's perfect score, and I've listened to so many more. I've seen the film plenty, but I've listened to the score so many more times. Just as a piece of music, it's beautiful. Morricone, Once Upon a Time in the West, definitely, because I think that's. I know that's if it's. He used a lot of the same kind of tricks as like Good, Bad, Ugly, but it feels more kind of grand and epic, so I kind of enjoy it a bit more. And Williams, really tough. I'm gonna say Superman, because
John Williams is like, here's a list of 40, choose one, and it will change depending on what day you wake up, you know.
Yeah, I mean that's just to bring it back to him one more time. Just another impressive thing about it. He did manage to think up 2 new, really distinct and memorable themes for superheroes who already had iconic themes. You know, so after Danny Elfman did Batman, after John Williams did Superman, Batman Begins and Man of Steel both had great, really memorable music in them. So good on that man.
Yep. All right. Well, that is our extensive, nearly 2-hour discussion on film scores.
I thought we were trying to cut these down.
Well, we can count the film history part as Kieran's section. Well, you know what? We are trying.
Still the shortest section.
We are trying to cut them down. But whatever. Sam, I'm sorry we're cutting and Kieran into your reading time. I guess that's what you both do when you leave.
Sleeping time,
sure.
I think.
Why not?
Or sleeping. All right. Well, we're going to head out here. But before we go, guys, where can people find you online?
You can find me at SSP Thinks Film at the Film Magazine, where we've got a lot of... we're going into Scorsese Week.
I think it's Scorsese Weekend.
Scorsese celebration of Scorsese, but before that we were celebrating the Disney centenary. So check out my countdown of all the major villains from Disney animation, and kind of I ranked them all from least to best, most threatening and memorable, essentially. So check that out.
And hopefully you don't find me anywhere. If you do, I'm K Judgmental in the various places across the webs. I I should have well, we're going into Halloween season, so in the nicest way to Scorsese, he's not my area. I've seen a couple of films across the span, and that's about it. So in Halloween season, I should have a Bela Lugosi, Where to Start With, coming out soon. Eventually, because it's now at its premiere and it's coming out next week, I think I'll begin to see the new Jekyll and Hyde, the new Hammer film, and there will be various bits in coming throughout when I get the chance to horror on.
Nice. And you can check out so for Disney 100, to go back to that, we did a ranking of all the Pixar films with the contributions from a lot of our writers, and I think I did 2 of the Toy Stories, both the Monsters movies, and Finding Nemo, so you could go read those and everyone else's contributions as well. And then upcoming, I have, what is it? Taxi Driver retrospective review, and
so insert Scorsese here.
Yeah, it's a collaboration between Scorsese and Robert De Niro, like Sam's about Kurosawa and Mifune. And by the way, Sam, you said name a more iconic one than that other than John Ford. Well, I mean, it's Scorsese and De Niro are up there. I mean, that's a pretty big one.
Well, I think I said from the mid-20th century, so
that's fair.
I think you're heading towards the later half of the 20th century. Then.
I was going to say Spielberg and Williams is my iconic film duo.
Well, maybe you can do that collaboration piece at some point in the future, Kieran.
Yeah.
I think I'll wait until Spielberg brings out his documentary on John Williams, which he's threatening to do. Which then, would John Williams have to write the music for a documentary about himself? That would be interesting.
Yeah, and so go read that stuff. And also, you can find me at Jacob Film Guy on whatever places I'm on. And shout out to James for watching this live.
Thank you.
Joe, Holly.
Thank you for reporting on our technical difficulties, James.
Yes, thank you. Also Liam and Greg and anyone else who actually listens to this. It is much appreciated.
Remember, you can listen to all the episodes. If you've missed any, they are being backlogged on YouTube to see our faces, and are also going up onto Spotify and I guess Apple and all these things. If you should miss a random fact or rant somewhere, to go and re-listen to it, and also buy the swag, obviously. Yeah,
down in our description we have the link to the TFM Redbubble store. We have a place where you can just give us money if you don't want to have more possessions, and you want to unburden yourself from all that money you have. So, I guess that's it. So thank you for listening, and goodbye.